Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly Torah portion class. This week is a very busy week. We have a number of Jewish calendar dates. First of all, today itself is the 14th of the month of Iyar and is known as Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, which I'll talk about in a moment. We also have Thursday, Wednesday night, and Thursday is Baomer, a very important date on the Jewish calendar. And the portion of the week is Behar, which we'll, of course, talk about also a little bit. So I'll divide this class into three parts. I'll start with the weekly portion, and then we'll talk a few minutes about Pesach Sheni, and then about Baomer. So the portion known as Behar is towards the end of Leviticus, and the subject matter is, it begins with the laws of the Shemitah. Shemitah is the sabbatical year, which basically is the law in the Torah that for 6 years a person may plow his field, plant his field, harvest and work the field. But every 7 years, for 1 year, a Jewish farmer was prohibited to work the land and to literally observe a year off. That's where the idea of a sabbatical year comes from. And God considers it like a Shabbos. Like every 7 days we're supposed to take off and keep it holy and remove ourselves from the worldly matters. In the same way, for a whole year, every 7 years, you have to work for 6, and the seventh year is a year of Shabbat, as the Torah calls it. Then begins a cycle of 7 times 7. That means like this: when the Jews got to Israel, at some point they began to count the Jubilee cycles. Jubilee is, as I mentioned, every 7 years, there's a year off. So they would count such a cycle 7 times 7, which is 49, and then the 50th year would be another year off. This is a Jubilee year. So it turns out that at the end of the 7 cycles, the 49th year is off and the 50th year is off. So that's 2 years off. I got to talk to my board and see if we can work some arrangement like that. I think 1 is good enough. But that was the process, and that was the mitzvah. And in case a Jew would think, taking off 2 years, that's a long time, and how am I going to sustain ourselves? Don't work for 2 years. How do you live? God promises here that work will be so successful and the yield will be so large that in the sixth year that it will last for 3 years and they will have nothing to worry about. But there's no doubt that the Jews did, they fulfilled this mitzvah. It was an act of tremendous, tremendous faith. But at the end of the 7th year, at the end of the 49 years, the 50th year was called Jubilee, and all slaves were freed. All land was returned to its original owner. And let me explain what that means. When the Jews came to Israel, their land was apportioned among the 12 tribes. Each tribe had a leader who was in charge of apportioning that section of Israel to his own tribe, and the tribe was divided into families. So every family got a plot of land which they were given, and that's yours to till, to work, to plant, to live on, and that became your ancestral heritage. Now, if someone fell on hard times, and he had to sell his house, he had to sell his field, So you would sell it, right? The law in the Torah was that you really didn't sell it, you leased it. Because when the Jubilee year came, all that land goes back to its original owner, which is the family that received it when the land was first apportioned. That will remain in your possession forever. Now you can sell it, meaning lease it, for 49 years. And the person would pay a price for the land. How do you, when you sell a house today, how do you value that house? Based on the market value, it's measured that way. How do you sell a house or a piece of land back in the biblical times? First of all, it depends on what year in the Jubilee year you were selling it. So for example, if last year was a Jubilee year and I sell it this year, the buyer has 49 years to live on it. That's a long time. So obviously I'm going to sell it for more. If I sell it 25 years into the Jubilee count, so the buyer is only going to get 25 years. It's like a lease. It's a lease. It depends how many years you're leasing it for, and that's how much you pay. And that's how it works. Now this brings me to a very interesting topic. And that is the Shemitah today. How does the Shemitah work today, the sabbatical year today in Israel? It's only in Israel. So Jewish farmers have to take off a year. And they do. But a new debate arose among the rabbis in Israel today. There's one school of thought, and the more modern school of thought, I'll call it, who says, to make Jews stop working for a year is a hard thing. It's a different kind of economy today, and to not work for a whole year is a problem. So they devised a way around this by selling it to an Arab. You find an Arab, he buys your land, and then you can work on it. It's not Jewish land anymore. And then the years of Shemitah don't apply to Arabs. So in that way, you can produce, and it belongs to the Arab for that year, and he sells it to you back at the end of the year. How much do you sell it to him for? Maybe a symbolic purchase. It's not yours. Similar to what we do on Chametz, on Pesach, right? What do we do on Pesach? We want Chametz, if you have a grocery store owner, yeah? He has $50,000 worth of merchandise of Chametz that he didn't sell before Pesach. He's going to go burn it all to get rid of his Chametz. Sells it to a goy. How much does he sell it to the goy for? Symbolic. He buys it right after Pesach back. This way it's not his during Pesach. He didn't violate the law of Chametz, of owning Chametz on Pesach. Now, if the goy wants to actually eat up the food and consider it his and act on the sale, then he has to pay fair market value, of course. But as long as he sells it back to you after Pesach, you make an exchange for $1. That's it. So they say the same thing is on Shemitah. Sell the land, and you sell it to an Arab, and then the Jews can work there. It's no problem. A Jew is allowed to work on Arab-owned land during the Shemitah year. There's no prohibition in that. As long as it doesn't belong to the Jew, it's all good. And in this way, no one has to interrupt their life, no one has to have a sabbatical, and that's the way they do. But that's not as simple as Chametz. Because some say there's a prohibition to sell land in Israel. You're not allowed to sell land in Israel. So there's a big debate about this.
What about God's
so the more religious people don't follow this, don't follow this, I don't want to call it the loophole, but this license to sell the land, and they literally take off a year. And they buy produce from Arabs, yeah?
Why does God say, do not work the land? What is God's intent?
What is God's intent when he says
he's
that?
Always giving the land a Shabbat.
I can say two things. First of all, he wants the land to rest for a year,
Right.
which is not a bad thing for the land either.
Exactly.
But it's also for us. Why does God want us to rest every seventh day? It's 50 days a year you're taking off. That's not a small thing. So why does he? It's the same idea.
But this workaround of selling it to the Arabs so you continue to work the land defeats God on two levels. One, you're still working the land, so the land doesn't get the rest.
Right.
Two, you don't get the rest.
That's true.
So it's a double subterfuge.
Well,
which is,
you could say that, and you could say that they're trying to be helpful to the Jewish owners of land, which would be devastated in our kind of economy if they would let their. So they found a way to make it workable. But your point is well taken. But I think it's even more than that. It's not only on the moral level; it's even on the legal level. Some say you can't do it. Even legally, you can't do it. So it doesn't work for some. And there's some people that indeed they take off a year and they do it. Is it easy? Maybe not. You know how many people have a challenge to keep Shabbos? For you, it's easy to keep Shabbos. For most people today, yeah, sure. Yeah, America brought, kind of like made Shabbos a day off anyway for most people. Shabbos and Sunday. So how many people have a hard time with keeping Shabbos, really, if they really wanted to? But you'd be surprised to know that a lot of people find it very difficult because their jobs demand them to be there Shabbos, and that's now. How about in the early 20s and 30s, when Jews came to this country in the beginning of the century, last century? They came over here and they were told, if you don't show up tomorrow, don't show up Monday. They were told on Friday, you don't come tomorrow, don't come back on Monday, you fight. And some Jews couldn't handle that. They couldn't live, to live such a test. They didn't pass it. Other Jews, they went to look for a new job every week. They literally went to look for a new job every week. But they managed. So it's an act of tremendous, tremendous faith. It is an act of faith. There's no doubt about it. So it's not easy to keep Shabbos for some people. Definitely it's easier to keep Shabbos once every 7 days to take off than take off a whole year. Because a year is a year.
The difficulties are clear. I'm just simply saying God's intent seems to me is pretty clear here.
Right. Yeah.
And that, if you're going to have a religious people acting irreligiously, even that I understand.
But when you think about it, but here's the thing. Everyone agrees that the reason to keep the Shemitah is not only because the land needs a rest. Because if the land needs a rest, he would give such a mitzvah to all peoples. I mean, only Jewish land needs a rest, and down the block, the guy that owns the land down the block, he doesn't need a rest. Why? I mean, what, the nature of Jewish land is different than the nature of non-Jewish land? So obviously there's other factors here that play in. It's not only for that. So they're saying that that's just a side reason. That's not the reason for Shemitah, because then every land would have to rest for a whole year. And therefore they think it's more of a spiritual thing. And as long as you don't own the land, there's no need for that. There's no spiritual problem. That's what they're saying. Okay. Well, I'm not going to get a legal standpoint, because legally it's problematic for some. I mean, I'm not an expert on the field. I'm not an expert on this area, but basics. So back in the day, that's how it was. Now there were variables, there were different laws, as they're pointed out in this portion, about selling houses. It depends. You can then redeem your house. If a person sold his house and his ancestral land or his field, and suddenly he fell on some good money, and he wants to buy back his land, so he could. You could buy back your land. And you'll see, you take off based on how many years that person had it, you pay him back per year. So that's how it would work. You have to let him have it for a year at least. If he went through the trouble of the purchase, the guy also deserves a little respect, the buyer. So, okay. There's different laws and different. Then we come to the law of the slave. The slave goes free every 50 years. Now, we know that a Jewish slave goes free every 6 years. After 6 years, not Shemitah. He works for 6 years and then he goes free. But there are sometimes a slave kind of likes his master. And he says, I like this guy. I'm happy being a slave. I want to stay. So he can stay. But after 50 years, by the Jubilee, he must go free. There's no such thing. Beyond Jubilee, no slave stays a slave forever.
Is this the difference between an indentured servant who signs a 7-year contract, like, what was it, help me out here. Yeah.
Yeah, what about, no, he wasn't a servant. He wasn't a slave. Jacob made a contract to work for his father-in-law for 7 years if he agreed to let him have his daughter in marriage. That was the agreement that he had. It's a different thing. He didn't own him. But slavery is a real thing. You own the person. Now, obviously, I should add the caveat to that. The Talmud says that anyone that bought a slave, a Jewish slave, is really buying a master. Because the laws of how you have to treat a slave are so particular and so demanding on the master. If the slave, you only have one pillow, you have to give it to the slave. If you only have one meal, you have to give it to the slave. You can't, the slave gets treatment in the Torah. You can't mistreat a slave. There's a very strict code of conduct when it comes to your employees and your slaves. To the point where the Talmud makes that statement, that if you're buying a slave man, you should know you're buying a master. Because it's going to be so, don't think you're getting a guy that's going to, polish your shoes and paint your walls, and whenever you want, and whenever you think that he has to do something, go Yankel, do it. It doesn't work that way. He's like an employee that has to be treated with great respect. But there are certain disadvantages of being a slave. There's no doubt about it. You don't own yourself. You're owned by someone else. So it's not an ideal situation, to put it mildly. And the truth is, slavery has been very, Jews don't have slaves. Jews never sold themselves, didn't buy slaves from other Jews. It wasn't a thing. How did one become a slave back then? There were two ways you could become a slave. Either you stole money from someone else and you didn't have the money to pay back, so the courts would then sell you as a slave to pay back the theft. And the sale, you sold yourself for a decent amount of money, you paid back to the guy that you stole it from, and you got stuck working for 6 years. If you wanted to stay beyond that, you would stay beyond that, and that would be also looked upon very the Torah doesn't look with great respect on someone who chooses to continue his slavery beyond the 6 years. It's one thing you're sold by the courts, you had no choice, okay. But to choose to be a slave beyond that point, the Torah doesn't promote that at all. In fact, you get punished. And we learned right in the beginning of in the portion of Mishpatim, it says over there that if a slave chooses to continue his servitude beyond the 6 years, he has to get his ears pierced. On the door, it's a whole process. And they punish the person because the ear that heard from God, you're a slave to God, and he goes and chooses to be a slave to someone else, should get punctured. Or as Rashi says, the ear that heard from God, don't steal, and went and stole, he should get punctured. So those are punishments. So slavery is not a very ideal situation at all. But it does exist, back then at least. Obviously today I don't think there's such a thing as slavery. Even if someone decided to buy a slave, and the slave agreed and the owner agreed, imagine it's a mutually agreed upon situation, I don't think that the laws of slavery even apply today.
But there's slavery all over the world.
Not Jewish slavery. No. Not Torah sanctioned slavery. And the slavery that most people conjure up in their mind where you're lynching them and you're mistreating them and you're beating them and who knows what, right? That never existed in the Torah. That was always out of the question. So I just wanted to put that out there so you understand when we talk about a slave, it's not exactly the way we think of it today. But it is a sirah. It is a thing that is not very, not an ideal thing at all. I mean, no one wants to be a slave, and you don't want to own a slave, and it's not something that we practice today in any way, shape, or form, and I don't even think it's legal anymore. I don't mean from the American law, or from any other Western law. I'm talking about Torah law. Back to the portion. We'll go quickly. So that's more or less what this Torah portion talks about. Is the 7th year, the Jubilee year, and how the Jubilee year on the 10th day of the year on Yom Kippur they sound the shofar, and once they sound the shofar, all the slaves go free. All the land goes back to its original ancestral owners, and so on, and it's almost like a reset. It's like a reset for Israel every 50 years. And things go back to their original state of existence. It's a beautiful concept when you think about it. Because sometimes you need that. You give people a second chance. Really, it's what it is. It's freedom. It says that the Jubilee years, they call it, I think they have it on the Liberty Bell. What do they have engraved on the Liberty Bell? It comes from this week's portion. It's call of freedom to the land or something, or is it Liberty Bell something? It's from this week's portion. And yeah, you can look it up. That's the greatness of giving classes today. You don't have to think too much. Fact check me. Let's see how accurate I am. All right. With that, I'm going to move on to another subject, and that is Pesach Sheni. Which give us the what you find?
Proclaim liberty throughout the land.
That's it.
To all the inhabitants thereof.
That's it. That's from this week's portion. Yeah.
It's verse for verse the Jubilee.
The Jubilee. It's from this week's portion.
The
Yeah.
instructions to the Israelites can't comprehend each day.
Did they give you the source? Where it comes from? Deuteronomy, Leviticus 25, 26.
Leviticus 25:10.
Yeah, 25:10. Right here. Right in front of me. Ukratem dror l'chol yosh ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. You should call it. You must designate it as a jubilee. Yeah. Either way, okay. So the idea of a reset. It's like a reset for the whole Israel. People can get back to their homes, their fields, their selves are freed, and so on. It's a reset button every 50 years, which is a nice thing. Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni is a fascinating day. What is Pesach Sheni? So briefly, it comes from the book of Numbers, and over there it talks about it was the second year when the Jewish people, a year after they left Egypt, right? So it came to bring the sacrifice, the Pesach sacrifice. So Moses told them that, you got to bring the sacrifice. And they did. The problem was that there were some people who had a death in their vicinity, in their family or their vicinity, and they were tummy. They were impure. They were impure. So what happens when you're impure? You can't bring the sacrifice. You're not allowed to. So they came to Moses and asked him, complaining kind of like, here it is, Pesach is coming, and everyone's going to bring the offering and have, the wonderful mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, and we're going to be deprived of this. We're going to be deprived of this. Now, when you think about this, it's like almost sounds like a ridiculous claim to Moses. What do you want from me? That's the law. If you can't bring, if you tell me you can't bring it, well, like what's the big news of it? Everyone knows the law. Someone died in your family. It's not like we're going to punish you for not bringing the offering. You can't. You tell me you're exempt. What do you want? What's the claim here? But the Torah tells us something very interesting. That Moses tells them, okay, I'll talk to God and I'll bring your claim or your argument before God, and we'll hear what He has to say. And lo and behold, God comes and tells Moses to tell them that exactly 1 month later they will have a second chance to bring the Pesach offering. Now the rabbis talk about this in very interesting terminology. Some of them wonder what's going on there. God made a law that you bring the Pesach, Erev Pesach, and if you can't bring it because you're tummy, you don't bring it. What's going on over here? And the answer that's given is that indeed, from on high, this mitzvah would never be given. It would never have been given if not for those few Jews that had this burning desire to be part of this extraordinary spiritual experience of bringing the offering of Pesach. God would never give a second chance, because there's no need for a second chance in that sense. You're exempt, that's it. But they had a tremendous want and a tremendous urge to be part of this mitzvah. And God was very pleased with that urge and that desire by these Jews, that even though they're exempt and all the explanations were given to them, that it is what it is, they still insisted that they really wanted to be part of this, and God acquiesced to them and gave them a second chance, and said the Lord, that anyone that is distant from Jerusalem, or he is Tomei, he gets exactly 1 month later. And what's the 1 month later? Pesach Sheni. That's today. Today is the 14th day of Iyar. When do we bring the Pesach, the regular Pesach? The 14th day of Nisan. Because it's the day before Pesach, right? The day of the Seder, which is the night of the 50th. So today is the second Pesach. And what's the law of the second Pesach? Exactly like the law of the first Pesach. Only that you're allowed to have chametz. So you have all the laws of the first Pesach. You have to bring the offering, and you have to eat it with matzah, and you have to eat it with mor, and you have to, that whole thing. And you're not allowed to break a bone from the sacrifice. You have to roast it, and all exactly the same. However, you can have chametz with you in your house while you're doing this. The first Pesach, obviously, you're not allowed to have any chametz, any leavened. The second Pesach, you're allowed. If I'm not mistaken, we spoke about this last week, the significance of that. Right? I think it was mentioned when we were talking about the Omer and the barley offering and how you move from Pesach to Shavuos, right? So during the month of Iyar, you can have Pesach, you can have matzah with chametz. Right? So I won't go into that again. But there's a great lesson to be learned from this story of Pesach Sheni. 2 lessons. Number 1, you should never be satisfied with being exempt from a mitzvah. Well, I'm exempt, that's it, go home, you have to spend the money, thank God, right, I'm exempt. It costs money to buy a sheep. I don't know what a sheep costs these days, but I'm sure it's not $9.99, it's, can't buy it in the dollar store. It costs, you gotta write a check, and you gotta bring it to the temple, and you have to do, and it's a job. So some people will take the approach, if I don't have to do it, I'll save myself some money and some burden. That's one way of looking at Judaism. It's one way of looking at a mitzvah. That, the less I have to do, the better off I am, as long as I don't have to, These Jews taught us a different approach to the whole spiritual experience. That spirituality and a connection with God is not something you look to get out of, it's one that you look to get into. And even though they had no way to get into it, because they knew that they're tummy, and they would have to wait 7 days to become pure, and Pesach will be, the day of the sacrifice will have come and went by the time they're pure, so they're out. They didn't say, they went to Moses' tent and said, we don't want to be out. Find us a way to be in. Moses said, I don't have a way to be in. But he heard their insistence. He said, you know what, let me see, maybe God can come up with something. And God came up with something. So that's number 1, a tremendous lesson. I think about this all the time. A lot of people take the approach, if I have to, I'll do it, but if I don't have to, that's a gain. But that's not the way we should look at it. If you can look to be in a relationship with God one more time, and one more experience or one more opportunity, you should grab it. Now look for ways to be in, not to be out. Some people look for a way to get out, right? They come up with excuses, and maybe even legitimate excuses. But we shouldn't be looking for excuses to be out of our relationship with God. We should look for ways to get into our relationship with God, what these people did. And forever, we have this wonderful mitzvah, Pesach Sheni, because of these few Jews. Not for them, it wouldn't have happened. All the mitzvahs were given by God. He initiated them. This was not initiated by God. This was initiated by man. And it's a great, testament to these guys, to these people. The other lesson that we learn from this is there's always a second chance. It's never too late. Well, I missed the opportunity. I came late, I missed the train. There's always a second train. There's always a second chance. And the previous Rebbe even went a step further. He said like this, he interpreted the words of the verse regarding the second Pesach as follows. What does it say there? And I'm going to quote. If you want, you can follow it on page 876. I want to read it to you because it's very special. It's on 876. So I'm going to start from verse 6. But there were men who had become ritually defiled because of contacts with a corpse. Therefore, they could not offer up the Passover sacrifice on that day. So they approached Moses and Aaron together in the tent that served as their house of study on that day. They came to him. Those men said, "We are ritually defiled due to contact with the corpse. It's not our fault. Why should we be excluded?" I'm just reading the bold. Why should we be excluded from offering up God's sacrifices in its appointed time along with the rest of the Israelites? Moses said to them, he didn't know what to say. So what does he say? Wait, I'll hear what God instructs me concerning you. And then God tells him to do it. What does God say? And I'm going to read this as well. And this is the key verse that I want to pay attention to. Verse 10. Speak to the Israelites saying, it's on the same page, on 876, under the Hebrew text. Speak to the Israelites saying, any person who becomes defiled from a corpse or is distant from the temple, when he couldn't be in the temple precinct on the first opportunity because you have to do it in the temple, whether this person is among you or in future generations, he may still make a Passover sacrifice for God, but he must offer it up in the afternoon of the 14th day of the second month, Iyar. Okay? He must eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Okay. But when you look in the Hebrew, and I'm going to point, it's the second to bottom line of the Hebrew text on page 876. You see it? It says that they speak to the children, Ish, any man, ki yeh tomei, who will be impure, la nefesh, because of a corpse, of a dead body, oy b'derech rechoika, or in a distant land, he's distant from the temple, on the first opportunity to make the Pesach. And then there's another word here that seems to be superfluous, the word lachem. What is this lachem doing here? Lachem means to you. The previous Rebbe took this word and he said something extraordinary. In the lesson of Pesach Sheni that it's never too late, right? You always have a second chance. He said, even if you are impure, you've sinned so much. Impurity over here he's interpreting as a spiritual impurity because of your sins. You've really went off the beaten path from God. You really messed up. And you feel as if I'm too far gone. How can I ever make amends with God? How can I ever fix this? And some people really are messed up. They really feel this way. He's so distant from God. That's how he's interpreting this verse. And then he says, Lachem, even if it was to you, it's your fault. You did this because it was your doing. In other words, you knew that you shouldn't do this, and you did it anyway. You messed up. Lachem means it's your fault. You have no excuse. Sometimes you have an excuse. I legitimately couldn't do it. I was impure. I was this. I was that. I was distant. No. Over here, the distance and the impurity was lachem, was because of you. Because of your bad choices. You could have done it right and you did it wrong. You failed miserably towards God. Nevertheless, Hashem says to the Jew, there's a month later, there's a second chance. There's never, in other words, there's no such a thing that a Jew is too far gone. No matter what. No matter what. There's always redemption. Like in the portion, 50 years later, there's redemption. You could be 50 years later. What's 50 years? That means you sold yourself as a slave. You were already an adult. You managed to steal. No one's 5 years old is stealing, right? And if he is, he ain't being sold as a slave anyway. So this crime for which he stole, for which he's being sold as a slave, he must have done after his bar mitzvah. So 50 years later, he goes free, right? In the worst case scenario, there's always redemption. Point is, it's never too late. You can never give up on another person. You may say, look at him. Look what he did to himself. He roamed the road to the really, really bad places. I was speaking some time ago to a Jew who told me that they have a relative that fell into Jews for Jesus. And they're heartbroken about it. And they consulted me what to do. Should we abandon them? Should we shut the door? What should be done? And I said to them, you have to leave a door open. Someone in the family should have a relationship with this person. If it's too much for the parents to deal with it, let it be another person. Let it be someone. Always keep the door open, because you never give up on any Jew, even if they're in the worst places, and that's pretty bad. That's a conversion, so to say, out of Judaism. That's terrible. There's no such a thing that he's too far gone. We learn it from today's date. Pesach Sheni. Even if it's lachem, even if it's because of your misdeeds and you messed up and you made the wrong choices, you were lazy, you were callous, you have a way back in. There's no such a thing. That brings me to Lag Baomer, which is this coming Wednesday night and Thursday. This is a fascinating day. Lag Baomer represents or celebrates two great sages. Rabbi Akiva. What's the story with Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva, as you know, had 12,000 peers of students, which is a total of 24,000. The Talmud tells us he had 12,000 peers of students. It's an interesting way to say it. It doesn't say he had 24,000 students. It says he had 12,000 peers. And they all died in the plague during this time. And on Lag Baomer, they stopped dying. It was the end of the plague was Lag Baomer. It stopped. And because of this, Lag Baomer is celebrated as a time that the ending of the terrible plague. The other celebration of Lag Baomer is the other sage, is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, known as Rashbi. Rashbi is an acronym for his name. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rashbi. Rashbi died on Lag Baomer, and he asked that this day should be celebrated for perpetuity as a celebration from the Jewish people. Why? Because on the day of a person's passing, we know a person's, all his life's accomplishments, everything he did in life, everything he accomplished, becomes revealed and strong and potent and influential and so on. So first, that was the day he died. So his life accomplishments becomes very, very strong and revealed and effectual today. What's his life's accomplishment? He's the one that brought to the world the Pnimius HaTorah, the inner dimension of the esoteric wisdom of God, which is what gave Judaism a new breath of life, a new lease on life, so to say. With him, with the Arizal, with the Baal Shem Tov, with the Hasidic movement, and so on. So it's celebrated. And ironically, I spoke about it yesterday. This day has become a day that not only Hasidim celebrate, even non-Hasidim celebrate. It's an incredible thing. Everyone celebrates like Baomer. Even though you would think Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai is more related to the Hasidic world, because the esoteric wisdom is really something that has been adopted by the Hasidic world. Yet it has its power and it has its influence on everyone. But it's interesting because when we talk about the plague that perished, that decimated the 12,000 pairs of students, the rabbis tell us what caused this plague. And I'll use the rabbis' words, "Leinagu kavod zeh bazeh." They did not show enough honor or respect for one another. And this caused the plague. God was very exacting of them because they should have known better. In other words, they were holy men. They were the students of Rabbi Akiva. So the question that I want to address today is, indeed, how did they fail this way? The Rebbe emphasizes the question even more. He says, their teacher Rabbi Akiva is known to have said, and he's attributed to him, the statement that the mitzvah to love your fellow as yourself is the greatest mitzvah in the Torah. That's the foundational mitzvah of the Torah. That was Rabbi Akiva who said that, their teacher. And they're his students. When it comes to that one mitzvah of showing respect for one another, basically living the mitzvah of Ahavat Yisrael, to love your fellow as yourself, they failed. That makes no sense. It's one thing if you would fail on something secondary to you, secondary to your teacher. But your teacher says this saying, I'm sure in every lecture he probably talked about this. Rabbi Akiva believed this very, that this is the mitzvah of the Torah. So I'm sure when they learned by him, and they came to hear his lectures, he must have talked about this over and over and over, being the most important mitzvah in the Torah. Yet, they don't take heed what's going on here. So there's a lot written about this, a lot said about this. The Rebbe says one thing, which I want to share with you, and then I'm going to offer you an additional aspect to it. Obviously, the Rebbe's explanation really hits it home. The Rebbe twists it, flips it on its head. Most people think that they failed in the mitzvah of Ahavat Yisrael. The Rebbe says it's the opposite. Because they were such loyal students to their teacher, and obviously they loved each other to no end, that's what created this failing. How? You ever heard the statement, you choke someone to death? Or you love someone to death. Sorry, you love someone to death. What does it mean you love someone to death? You choke him with love. You choke him with love. What does choke him with love mean? You know what that means when you say that? Tell us.
You overwhelm somebody else to the point where they're smothered by your love.
Right. The Rebbe says that was the symptom. That was what happened with the students of Rabbi Akiva. They loved each other so much that they choked each other. They loved, what is it? They choked each other. What's the statement again? I just said it.
Loved each other in the upper.
Choked each other.
Smothered them.
Yeah.
Smothered them with love.
Love, right. Smothered them with love. What is the meaning? So here they are, okay? Imagine I'm Rabbi Akiva and you're the students of Rabbi Akiva. I give a lecture for an hour. And you guys really, really want to understand every word coming out of the mouth of Rabbi Akiva. Right? And you put yourself to it, and you heard every word, and you absorbed it, and you understood it. So now imagine I leave the room, I'm done with my lecture, and you guys is talking about, wow, this is incredible what we just heard, right? So you sit there and say, wow, did you hear what the rabbi just said? He said this and that and the other, and this is what he meant, and it was great, right? And Yanko, he said, what are you talking about? He said something else. That's not what he meant. that he meant something else completely. And you understood what I said very different than what you understood. So there's two ways to go about it. You could say, the heck with it, you want to understand it the way you understand it. Okay, have it your way, I don't care. But because my teaching or Rabbi Akiva's teaching is that important to you, and it's equally important to you to understand that as it is equally important to you that he understands it, you love him so much that you want him to understand and take away what I just expressed, that he should understand it 100%. Because why should he understand it less than you? Why shouldn't he grow from this lesson and appreciate this lesson as much as you? So because you love him as much as you love yourself, so it was important to you that he should understand Rabbi Akiva's lesson the way you did. But he doesn't understand it the way you did. So what do? Instead of giving him a space and saying, okay, there's a room for another understanding, they didn't allow that space for each other, because they really loved each other, and they were convinced that the way they understand it is the true way of understanding their master's teaching. And they wanted you to appreciate that as well, so they fought each other in that way. Not in a way of fighting, but they drowned each other out. They smothered each other with love. That's called smothering each other with love. I love you so much that you need to understand life the way I understand it, because then you'll get it, right? So it's their love that led them to not respect each other. It doesn't say they didn't love each other. It says they didn't honor each other. It's very important to be the nuances there. It doesn't say they didn't love each other. It says they didn't honor each other. They didn't honor each other because they loved each other so much. And that's a failing, by the way. Because part of love is to give someone space as well. But because you love them so much, you just don't let them, you really want to share the light with them, right? You have a lot of times people in their own families. You have a student that went off to college and he got inspired and he went to his teacher and they went off to yeshiva to learn, right? And they're loving it. They come home and they got to share the light with the whole family. And the family says, hey, Yankel, do me a favor. We're having dinner now. This is not a yeshiva here. Just enjoy your dinner and let me enjoy mine. But he wants to share the light with everyone, and he just can't hold back. So he has to tell them exactly what he just learned from his teacher that they have very little interest in hearing about right now. Certainly now, in the middle of dinner. But he can't control himself. He feels, I love you so much, you got to hear the light. You got to say, I want you to see the light the way I saw it. And that's what happens. You choke the other person with love. And you give the person no space. And that's what happened with the students of Rabbi Akiva. It happens to the best of us. Because of good intentions. So the Rebbe says, it doesn't say, that they didn't love each other. It says, they didn't respect one another. Or they didn't show honor to one another. So one very important that I honor your way of thinking as well. I may think of it different, but you're also a human being. You also have a brain. And you also have a right to understand Rabbi Akiva's teaching the way your brain filtered it and absorbed it and internalized it. And it's not only my way. Even though I think it's important, I think it's my way is right. And it could be it was right.
Why would it, having understood all of that, why would God choose a plague as a proper response to this frustration?
What would be the response? What would be a better response?
I'm not looking to calibrate God's response. I'm trying to understand. It seems to me that this is a very harsh response.
Very good question. To answer your question is like this. You're wearing jeans right now, right?
Yes.
If a drop of coffee fell on your jean, wipe it off and you move on, right? You're not running home to change. You're certainly not, it's not a crisis, right? But I'm going to a wedding this Thursday night. My niece is getting married, and imagine a little tiny bit of coffee spills on her gown. Right there. Now you got a crisis. Now it's a problem. People are crying. She doesn't have another gown. What are we going to do? This is a problem. You know why we use white wine under the chuppah instead of red wine? because you have to give the kala and the chassan to drink a little bit, just in case a little bit drips. Shouldn't be red. That's the reason. you didn't know that, right? It's a practical thing. It's not a religious thing.
Never thought about that.
You'll always see they're always using white wine, just in case.
That's fascinating.
Because a little red wine on your jeans is not good enough. The world doesn't come to that. Why am I saying this example?
You have a bullet hole in it.
Makes it nicer, right? Some people like that.
Get stressed. You pay extra for it.
But there's some souls that are so sensitive that a small infraction is just too much for them. The holier you are, the holier you are, the less tolerable are even small infractions. Simple souls like us in this room, they didn't show respect for one another. We're not dying because of it. The world didn't come to an end. It's bad, but it's not but the holier you are, and there's more pristine soul you have, which the students of Rabbi Akiva were holy men. This small infraction was too much to him. It was too much. And it's like a wedding gown. Their souls were like wedding gowns. A small stain is over. It's a crisis. Got to go change. Your soul is like a pair of jeans, not the end of the world. Unless you get a real rip in the middle of the pants, your whole leg is showing, and you can move on, right? You're not Rabbi Akiva students. God is more exact than from them. They should have known better. The holier you are, the more is expected of you also. So that's the difference. I was going to talk about like Baomer also, but I wanted to mention another explanation. I spoke about the Rebbe's explanation about this thing, but I'll throw in another thing that I once heard. I don't believe it's as significant, but it's an interesting take. I don't remember where I saw this, but it made an impression because it was very pertinent. It's interesting that the language of the sages is that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 zugos, which means peers. Instead of saying simply he had 24,000 students, it says he had 12,000 peers. Why does it say that?
Are you saying peers or pairs?
Pairs.
Pairs as in two.
Two, yeah. What did I say? I'm sorry?
I thought it said peers.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Peers, meaning groups of two.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just wanted to be sure about that.
Yeah. So they had 12,000 pairs. Now that's not by accident that they use that language. Instead of saying there are 24,000 students, it's 12,000 pairs. And for this to understand this and appreciate, let me share with you a little bit of history. It won't take long. You know when Rabbi Akiva and his students lived? In the beginning of the 2nd century. That's when Rabbi Akiva lived. Rabbi Akiva, as we know, lived during the time of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. You ever heard of the Bar Kokhba rebellion? That was in the year 135. The Bar Kokhba, the destruction of the temple by the Romans happened in the year 70 or 69, 70. And 50, 60 years later, Bar Kokhba, the Jews, organized a serious rebellion against Rome to retake Jerusalem, rebuild the third temple. That's what they were going to do. And unbelievably, the Bar Kokhba army was very successful. They didn't ultimately succeed, but they were giving the Romans a run for their money, let's say. They killed thousands of Romans. It was a major battle. It wasn't crushed in a minute. Rabbi Akiva believed that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach. Did you know that? Rabbi Akiva actually believed that Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach because he felt that he is now bringing Mashiach. He's taking back Israel from Rome, and this is going to be the building of the third temple in Voila. It's great. And it says that he even carried, Rabbi Akiva carried Bar Kokhba's packages. There's suitcases for him. So now Bar Kokhba has an army. He needs troops. Where do you think he got troops from?
24,000.
Rabbi Akiva split up his students into pairs. 12,000 will be learning in the yeshiva to give the spiritual spiritual force they need. And the other 12,000, he said, you go fight. Basically, he divided them into twos. And when we say loy nagu kavod zeh bazeh, they didn't show honor for one to the other. It's like today in Israel, right? You know, there's a big debate in Israel about the yeshiva students that want to learn all day and they're not drafted into the army. And the soldiers come and say, what do you mean? We're going to the front lines and you guys are sitting and learning. It's not fair. And a lot of people write articles. It's a whole debate in Israel about it, right? You know about that. And who's right? Who's right? So it's very possible that back then there was also such a debate. And the yeshiva students were saying we're the more important force for the protection of Israel. And the soldiers were saying we're the more important force for the protection of Israel. And they ended up not honoring each other. It's exactly what we see today. Though the Jewish people need to have a force of thousands of students learning to keep the spiritual force of the Jewish people intact so that the soldiers on the front line can be successful, they absolutely do. Jewish people need to have the spiritual. They need a good army and they need a good spiritual army. You need both. The Jewish people always had that. King David, it says, since the days of King David, he already split the society that way. There were those that are going to be back studying and learning Torah to offer the front lines, the spiritual power and the protection from God that they need, so that their armies and their tanks and their artillery and their whatever they do to win the war will be successful. But now the question becomes, who is more important? Who is who really affords the protection for the Jewish people? The answer is both, of course. One can't do it without the other. If you're only going to have yeshiva students, it's not going to work. If you're only going to have soldiers, it won't work. You need both. God wants us to work within the natural means, but He also wants us to understand that for a Jew, natural means is, to say a little Tillim too, right? You got to have the spiritual dynamic, and you have to respect each other. You have to know that there's need for both. The religious student shouldn't say, I'm the guy and the soldier is not, and the soldier shouldn't say, I'm the guy and the yeshiva student is not. And when they will show honor and respect for each other, then there's no problem.
Not to digress, but in Israel, half the problem is the fact that yeshiva students receive incentives. I just wonder that in a country.
What do you
like
mean by
Israel,
incentives? What do you mean by
it's financial incentives that come from the government.
To who?
The people who study Torah. These are significant financial.
What are you
incentives.
talking about? I don't think that's true.
They
What
do.
kind
They
of
receive-
incentives?
They receive financial incentives.
What kind of incentives?
Some of it comes in the form of child support.
That's
Some of-
nothing to do
some of
with
it comes in the
child
form
support
of
comes to
stipends.
anyone. Child support, anyone gets child support. You have children in Israel, you're getting a stipend every month, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a yeshiva student, whether you're a plumber. Has nothing to do with the yeshiva student.
So
There is such a thing, I know what you're referring to. You're probably referring to the kollel. The kollel was a system where married men sit and learn for years after they're married.
Right.
They get a stipend. What kind of stipend do you think they get? They get
Not much,
butlers.
but
They get butlers, okay. So that's part of coalitioning. That's part of the coalition bargaining. And they get so that they can keep these yeshivas going. Fine. What's the problem with that?
I'm saying that
I mean, the
Let me-
soldiers
let-
get a
let me put
bigger.
the question- let me
The
put-
soldiers get a bigger stipend.
let me put the question to you differently. Out of every 100 yeshiva students that are in Torah,
Yeah.
to the extent that we're talking about building the spiritual strength of Israel and making a contribution,
Yeah.
and that this is a real thing, right? Nobody's debating this.
No, debate is it needed?
No, let's assume let's
course it's needed.
let's take that. We'll stipulate to that. Okay, it's needed. Question is, out of every 100 students, how many would be better off being soldiers, and how many truly make the contribution we're talking about here to the spiritual strength of that? And I realize it's a very difficult question.
Hard answer. I don't know the
I
answer.
don't know. It
to
seems to me that there's a lot of people that are in Kollel who, this is harsh, I'm about to say something very harsh here, who don't necessarily have the
I'm
talent
sure that
or
you're
the
right.
wherewithal.
I'm sure you're right. There's overage. There's no doubt
Right,
about
and
it.
that these sorts of distortions arise because the rabbis can easily walk into the room and go, "You 20 guys are fantastic, and I teaching you are moving forward every second, and you 20 guys are taking up space."
Okay, so I got news for you. You go to the Israeli army today, as opposed to 30 years ago, and you will see a whole new, all kinds of battalions
Yeah.
of religious Jews. It's tremendous. It's very much.
Oh no.
And a lot of people are coming to the realization that not everyone is cut out to learn all their life, or for 10, 20 years straight. They go to the army. They do their service. And there's a lot of religious soldiers today, much more than when I was a student in Israel 40 years ago. You wouldn't find a religious student in the army. You almost couldn't find such a thing. Today you have, with payers, they're in the army, fighting, the green costumes, or what do you call it, uniform.
Where is the biblical foundation for Jews any Jews, not fighting in the army, and only studying? This is the other
It's from
thing.
David, King David, I'm telling you. He set up that system. There was always, and he would divide the spoils between the two groups. He'd give them 50% to the people that stayed behind and 50% to the soldiers. He says clearly in the Bible. We'll get there one day. We learn every Shabbos morning now. We learn the Bible, so we'll get there. But that's a system that's needed if we're being honest about it, and we're being objective about it, without the emotional, political undertones. We must come to the conclusion that Israel can never survive without a robust spiritual dynamic to it. It's impossible. Even these soldiers, even the most secular Israeli, when he gets married, who does he go knock on? Which door does he go? He needs a rabbi. When he gets a bar mitzvah, he needs a rabbi. You need to have the healthy spiritual force that keeps the Israeli and the Jewish people together, and strong and focused, and we shouldn't be lost. So I don't think that's a debatable issue.
That's not.
Because you can now argue with me, do we need to have 20,000 such students, or is 15,000 enough? Okay, you can have that argument. No problem. Okay, you can have an argument. So I'm telling you that more and more are going to the army now, actually. More and more. I'm not saying it's in the tens of thousands, but it's becoming a real noticeable change and force within the Israeli army. Let me clue you into a secret here that people don't notice. The Israeli government is quite happy with this arrangement, especially the generals and the army. What do you call it? The hierarchy. I mean, the ones that run the army. Why do they want this? When you have a religious, especially the ultra-religious in the army, now you got a problem. What's the problem? You got to daven mincha with a minyan, you have to daven ma'ariv with a minyan, you have to daven shachris with a minyan. What kind of food do you give them? Well, I don't need from this hechsher, I need from that hechsher. You know what a hechsher means? I need from this supervision. It becomes a whole, get out of here, I don't need this. They don't even want it. They're much happier with not having to contend with that kind of situation. Now, they'll never turn down a religious soldier, but there's a quiet agreement between everyone that it's probably better that they sit in the yeshiva and drive their Rosh Yeshivas crazy with what chicken they're going to have for dinner.
That's fine today. That's fine for today. But if you look at the long-term demographics,
I don't mean to make light of it, but but there's a
makes
truth to it.
sense.
if you look at who's having children in Israel,
Yeah.
by 2050, the majority of all the military age kids in the country are going to be people from the Haredi population.
Is that true? Like 50?
Some of the numbers are different, but the point is, Jews are not having,
I know that.
non-religious Jews are not having children in
It's a
Israel.
very
Religious
big problem.
Jews. So who's going to run, in other words, the country's going to become majority religious people.
That's going to be a while till that happens, but you're right. Listen, Israel will manage. If the Israelis need soldiers to go, they will have soldiers to go. The Haredi and the religious group, the religious people of the religious community will never allow Israel to fall. Will never. They'll be the first to go when that day comes. But right now, that day is not there because there's a need for spirit. There's not enough religious Jews in Israel. Let's be honest about it. How many religious Jews in there? When you talk percentages, how much is the percentage? 10%? 90% is not secular in Israel, or 80% for sure. So what are we talking about? We're kidding ourselves. When we get to 50-50, we'll worry about. We'll say, okay, now it's time for it to be 50-50, but it's not there. It's the other way around. The religious are telling the secular, you left the whole religious arena to us. Help us out a little. Do a little more mitzvahs. Let's share the burden on every way. But it doesn't work that way. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm not telling you have to do this, you have to do that. But the division right now is that the whole spiritual burden, I don't call it a burden, but the whole spiritual force and what's the word I'm looking for? The spiritual base for Israel is being left to the hands of 15% of the population. So you got to let them do it. You got to let them do it. Because there's an absolute need for a strong spiritual base for the Jewish people. Anyone who wants to argue that and wants to debate and say we don't need that, then it's a different debate. You know what I'm saying? I'm not talking to. If we don't even think you need that, then I have nothing to contribute to that conversation. But if we all agree that we need to have a spiritual base, and the fact of the matter is that today in 2022, the spiritual base in Israel is more or less, if you're talking about a serious commitment, is only 15 to 20%. That's not a lot. So you got to let them be strong. That's it.
By 2050, 1 in 4 Israelis will be ultra-Orthodox.
1 in 4. That's 25%.
Right.
So that means now there's only 15%. 15% is a small number. So you want to chip into that too? Come on. You got to let them be as strong spiritual as they can to make sure that the whole Israel has the protection from God, not only from tanks and more and artillery, but from Torah and from mitzvahs and from the connection to God, which is so crucial to Israel. Does that make sense? And that's where this respect came back in the day and today as well. Guys, the yeshiva students are absolute necessity. The soldiers are an absolute necessity. And we respect each other's position, and Israel will thrive. That's the truth. I really do believe that. Because one without the other is like, a heart without a lung. It doesn't work. You can't have it. A heart needs a lung, and a lung needs a heart.
Rabbi, you have a barbecue this Wednesday?
This Wednesday, you're going to
In the
be...
park, right?
No, right here, right in the back of the shul, the new pergola. In the pergola, we're going to start using it.
In the park.
Not in the park. Look, you got the information, the invitation?
I'm sure got it, Rabbi.
Sure. No, it's in the newsletter. I'm saying for this barbecue I'm talking
Well,
about.
it said park, so I thought it was.
It said park?
No, that's what they.
Man, I don't remember. I have to look.
I didn't get
It's right in the
that.
back there.
Anyway, all watching, have a wonderful day, everyone, and a wonderful week. And I want to invite you all, if you're in the vicinity, to come join us on Wednesday at 5:30 for a grand barbecue and entertaining evening in honor of Lag Baomer. Thank you and have a great week.
That's the way it is.